I'm Robin Brannon. I'm a licensed clinical marriage and family therapist, and I'm the founder and director of Better Together Family Therapy. I've been practicing family therapy with families with children of all ages for about 19 years. My master's degree is from the University of Maryland School of Public Health in their Family Studies department, and I'm licensed to practice marriage and family therapy only in the state of Maryland. I was a school-based therapist in a wonderful program called Linkages to Learning for 8 years, and then spent 5 years supervising school-based therapists in the Kennedy, Wheaton, and Einstein clusters of Montgomery County Public Schools as the director of Kensington Wheaton Youth Services. I believe that program is now called Every Mind Youth Services. So if you tried to Google it, you would have to find it under that name instead. But I shifted to focusing my practice on kids and families with ADHD, executive function disorders, and learning issues after having my own child with needs like that. My kids are now in 4th grade and 8th grade in MCPS, so I'm a parent as well, and I'm feeling the online school stress that all of you are feeling. Maria, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hello and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Maria Smith. I'm a clinical social worker and a child and family therapist. I have been working with families for over 10 years in the DC area. I've worked in Baltimore as well as St. Louis and El Salvador. And I am currently working in my other job as a school-based therapist. I've worked as a school-based therapist in both an elementary school and a middle school for the past 3 years. And so I've learned a lot about kind of the school system and how it works internally and how to support both students and teachers and parents with the academic side of school as well as the social emotional needs that come up in the school setting. And I have also observed this transition, the swift transition in the spring, and now over the summer, the variety of different plans that have come out for different schools in trying to figure out what works best for children and for families here this fall with COVID-19 still remaining a strong presence. And I believe it's, I guess, the most important part that kind of a theme we'll see is taking care of ourselves as we're taking care of our children and we're taking care of each other and giving ourselves a moment of grace in that this is not normal. I tell that to my students and families, that teachers are well aware that this is not normal schooling, and so we'll try to do our best, but we are all in this together. So it's great to be here with you all today, and feel free to be open and honest with any questions or concerns, because I'm sure you're not alone in the questions that you're having.
Absolutely. A couple of really quick administrative things first. This is not a therapy group. If you're interested in therapeutic services, we would be happy to help you out with that. You can give us a call or you can reach out to us through our website at betterfamilytherapy.com. But we will not be doing therapy in this session today or dispensing any sort of medical advice. We are here to give you ideas for what you can do, not ideas for what you must do. So be really careful to banish that potential parent guilt that comes up when you get all these ideas of things that you could do to support your child in online learning. That doesn't mean that you have to do every single one of them or that you have to do even one of them. This is an opportunity to give you some tools to solve some problems that might be on your mind right now. So speaking about what's on your mind, just take a minute right now and notice your mental multitask. What else is kicking around in there? Do you still need to clean up from lunch or make lunch? Are you thinking about what you need to get done today? Are you thinking about all the administrative tasks that you might need to do before your child gets started with school in the coming weeks? Do you need to figure out how to log into the portal and get all of those Zoom links going? Whatever is on your mind right now, just take a minute and notice it. And then very carefully set it aside, just for the time that you're here, so that you can really focus and tune in to what we're talking about. If you need to write it down, sometimes that helps. That's one of my favorite tools for getting rid of the mental multitask, making a little list of those things I need to remember to do later. Just take a minute and do that. And while you're doing that, we're just going to take a couple of deep breaths so that we're nice and centered and grounded. We're going to breathe in through our nose and out through our mouth. Breathe in calm and breathe out tension. One more good deep breath, focusing just on the breath itself, feeling the air go in and out. So now that we're present, we can do just one thing at a time. And if I had one tip, just one, that synthesizes everything we will talk about today, it really is do one thing at a time. Because trying to do bits and pieces of things all at once, the idea of that is what has us so stressed about parenting while our children are in online school and while many of us are also working in the same space. Okay, so starting from a place of calm. Your stress is contagious. You know that as parents. Sometimes that brings up our parent guilt too, right? But your calm is contagious too. And we had one of our participants ask us on the registration form, how do I encourage my son to not have angry outbursts, not yell, and to be more calm? It starts with you. It doesn't end with you. We'll give you some tools for your child as well, but it absolutely starts with you. So one particular tool that you're going to need in your toolbox going into this school year is your refresh button. We all know the refresh button on the computer screen. It's that little button you use when things aren't quite going the way that you need them to go and you just want to start over. Everybody needs a refresh button. You need a refresh button that you can use at any point during your day, something that doesn't take you any more than 5 minutes of your time, but that you can focus solely on for those few minutes, that gives you that sensation of a refresh. It's a mental reset, it's an emotional reset, it's a tiny little piece of self-care. It can be a piece of music that you listen to from start to finish when you just need to adjust your mindset. Sometimes it's like a power anthem, and sometimes it's something that's just gentle and calming and soothing. Whatever your preference is, whatever feels good to you is fine. For some people, it's art. You might keep drawing paper nearby and draw something quickly when you need to just mentally reset. It could be a really quick burst of exercise. It could be meditation. It could be a cup of tea. There are so many different things that you can do for your refresh button, but you absolutely need to have a refresh button. Maria, do you have a refresh button?
Yes, my refresh button is reaching out and finding someone, like a friend, a family member, another person who can understand the struggles, whether it's online learning or other things related to COVID. I think connecting with supports is my refresh button, and laughter as well through that. Like, let's laugh a little bit about how life is right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry about that. I just accidentally advanced the slide by trying to shift the screen over a little bit. But we're still on the refresh button. So my refresh button actually tends to be Broadway show tunes. Whatever song is getting stuck in my head, it's usually from a Broadway soundtrack, and that's usually my reset. I will turn it on in my office in between clients. I will, if I need a movement break, get up and dance around, especially if I'm feeling a little sleepy or a little bit unfocused. So think for a moment about what that refresh button is for you. Write it down if you're not sure that you'll remember it after this, but you're going to use that refresh button in moments where you're feeling spent and burnt out, or in moments when you're transitioning from a work task to a parenting task, or back from a parenting task to a work task. And as far as having tools for your child, it's really important to find your child's refresh button too. Sometimes kids can tell us what makes them feel better when they're really stressed out, and sometimes we have to observe it in their behavior. If your child has a particular stuffed animal they go for, a particular blanket they go for, if they have a certain spot in the house that they gravitate toward when they're feeling stressed. Some kids like to use a bath or a shower for a reset. There are a lot of different tools that kids will use, but it's especially helpful to notice what they do from a sensory standpoint. So if they get themselves warmer or cooler when they need to diffuse some stress, or if they go for that comfort object, that's their refresh button. And you can really encourage them to notice that and to use it thoughtfully throughout their day. We have some ways to cue them visually for that as well. Older kids and teens can probably tell you what feels good to them. And if they can't, it may just be something that they really enjoy. If your child really likes to shoot hoops, or your child likes to run, or your child likes to ride their bike or jump on a trampoline, whatever it is that they really enjoy doing, that can really help shift their mindset and shift their mood. So you want to use that refresh button proactively as much as you can, so that you're diffusing that tension throughout the day and it's not piling on and piling on and piling on. That's one of the best ways to really prevent a meltdown for your child. I see some little things popping up.
Yeah, we've got a question. Yeah, we've got a question. What are ways that children typically show they are stressed?
Ooh, that's a very good question. Some kids are more obvious about it, right? Some kids might bite their nails or chew on their hair, or do something else. Their body language might change in a noticeable way. Other kids might get quiet when they're stressed. They might stop participating in whatever is going on around them. You might notice it in other places throughout their day. They might be a little short-tempered or irritable with you when you're asking them a simple question or calling them for lunch or something like that. If you have ideas of how your own child shows stress and you would like to stick those in the chat, we can do that as well, and we can share what the group has to say about that. Maria, do you have anything to add to that? Signs of stress in kids?
Yeah, I think if it's your child or your student, noticing changes, I think, and knowing that, for each person, it might look different. Being stressed, like Robin was saying, might be turning inward or turning outward to show that stress. The fight, flight, or freeze responses that we talk about with anxiety can also be signs to look out for. But I think, using intuition and that relationship that you have with the child to help notice, okay, what's going on here, and really trying to tune in to not only what is being communicated verbally, but also non-verbally.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you're working yourself and you don't have superpowers. You don't have x-ray vision to show into your child's room, or to see into your child's room and show you what you're doing. We do have cameras for that these days, but that would be the mental multitask that we don't necessarily want to do. So how do you manage everything that you have on your plate, and how do you help your child manage everything that they have on their schedule for the day? You actually, as a parent, do have a secret superpower. You are much better than your child, because of brain development, at sequencing tasks, at setting up a schedule, at creating an order of things. Even if you don't feel like that's your strength, you've done it at this point enough to put this Q&A on your schedule and to show up here in the middle of a Saturday. You managed before COVID to get your kids to school, to get them to doctor's appointments, to do all of those things that you needed to fit into your day. And you do it so automatically that you don't even really think about it. But that process of sequencing tasks can be such a helpful skill for you to use in this time period, but also for you to share with your kids during this time period. One of our participants had asked, what should teens be able to do on their own? And that's a really great question. Every child is a little bit different. It is going to vary if they have learning differences, if they have ADHD, if they have executive function challenges. That will impact the age at which kids and teens can do various things on their own. So we can certainly talk more specifically about that if you'd like us to pop that in the chat as well. But if your middle or high schooler can't yet set calendar reminders, this is a great opportunity to teach them to do that. If they have a smartphone, they can do it on their phone, or if they have an Apple Watch or something like that, that can be really great for kids that need something that physically buzzes to remind them that it's time to go to the next class, or it's time to turn in an assignment. Anything that you need a reminder for, you can set it up in that way, either on the smartphone, or if not on the smartphone, they're using some sort of electronic device to access school right now. So whatever that device is, it might be a school-provided Chromebook, it might be a device that you already had at home, such as an iPad, but there's a calendar feature in there. You can get those calendar reminders to pop up in the corner of the screen. And on most devices, you can set them by voice command, like you would do with an Alexa, like an Echo Dot or something like that. But you can also set them by typing. So if your child is in middle school or high school and doesn't know how to set up calendar reminders and sequence tasks in that way, this is the time to really sit down with them and teach them that. Show them how to make that happen. Younger kids might also get a kick out of knowing how to make that happen, particularly on devices where they can do it by voice command. They might have a little fun setting up tasks for you or otherwise putting things in there. This is also something that I really recommend to families around daily routines. You can set Alexa up to tell your child it's time to brush their teeth. And absolutely, it's not a substitute for you, but it is a substitute for you having to say the same thing over and over and over again, right? If you've got that extra verbal reminder just coming automatically, hey, it's time for this, it's time for that, it's time for the bedtime routine, it's time for lunch. Whatever it is, you can really use technology to automate some of those reminders so that you don't have to be popping in the doorway saying, hey, it's time for your English class, or it's time for PE. That can happen for you with the devices with a little bit of advanced planning. What if my child is unmotivated? This is an issue that comes up a lot. What if my child doesn't like school? What if my child is feeling some anxiety about school? What if my child is just not interested? You know, you may have a child who's I'm never going to use math in the real world kind of kid. That happens sometimes. So what do you do if your child is unmotivated? Oh. The first thing that you need to do is identify something that they are motivated about. If it's difficult to find something that they are motivated about, that's something that maybe we should talk a little bit further about. If you're finding your child feeling unmotivated toward everything right now, that can be a sign of some depression and something that we should maybe talk through a little bit further. We're happy to do that. We do free 15-minute consults. So that would be a great topic for one of those conversations. But the first thing you want to do is just identify those personal interests and goals, right? Maybe she wants to get really good at mastering a three-point shot. Or maybe he wants to earn enough money to save up for his own smartphone or a particular pair of shoes, something like that. It doesn't have to be financially linked. It could even just be your child is really frustrated with what you're serving for dinner and they're invested in choosing what's going to be on the dinner table the next night. So you identify those personal interests and goals first. And then once you've done that, there we go. You can connect the school-related goals to the interests. So if you really want your child to get to their Zoom meetings on their own, right? Maybe they do that now 50% of the time, or maybe they don't do that now at all. You want to be really careful to make that next step manageable. So if they do it 50% of the time, maybe reaching for 100% of the time or 80% of the time is reasonable. If it's something that they're never ever doing right now, if that's a skill they really have not mastered, then you want to aim for getting to 1 or 2 Zoom meetings a day on time. That's the goal. And then you connect it to what they're invested in. So When you're able to do that 2 days in a row, we're going to have pizza for dinner, or you're going to get to choose what kind of family game we play in the evening, or I'll take you to the park and you can have some extra time practicing with your basketball, right? So you tie the interest back to the thing that you really want them to invest in, and then they become intrinsically motivated, right? Sometimes parents talk about this as bribery. It's not so much bribery as it's making the things that matter to you matter to them. Because what matters to them at this stage in their life is about time horizon. They can only think about what they're doing today or what they're doing tomorrow. As an adult with a fully developed brain, you can think about how what they're doing today will affect what happens next month, next year, 5 years from now. But they really don't have that capacity. So they're not inherently motivated today to pay attention in school because someday they would like to go to college, right? That's too far off. So you really need those smaller motivators throughout to help your child be invested in the process. And then once you hit those reachable targets, you reward that performance immediately. So it has to be something that can happen that day. If they're saving up money toward a smartphone, you might do it one tiny little piece at a time, right? It might be quarters that you're giving them, or it might be that little chunk of time on the basketball court. So as soon as that performance target is hit, you want to make sure that the reward is right there, right? That basketball time is right there, or the coins are right there to drop in the piggy bank, because that immediate reward is what makes the task inherently rewarding for that child. This is especially important if your child has ADHD, if your child is on the autism spectrum. Those kids really do best when they've got a clear, immediate reward in front of them. It helps drive motivation, and motivation helps drive executive function. So they just function better when they know that they have something positive that they can expect in the situation. All right. So this is our path to parent. Oh, darn it. Let's try that again. This is our path to parent help for teens and preteens. We do have some folks today who have kids up in that 15 to 18 range. So absolutely, your teens and preteens, they may need your help sometimes, but especially for them, it's going to be really important that you get the help of the experts first. The material that they're working on in school, or even the way that they're doing math in school, the way that they're talking about their writing and other concepts, it's different than what you were taught. So you really need to get the help from those teachers first. Use the experts for what they are there for. That's really important. Okay, so this is a flow chart that you can actually use with your teen or preteen just to remind them, what do you need to do when you feel like asking your parent for help? Like, hey mom, I don't get it. Hey dad, I don't get it. Flag it for follow-up. You're going to ask your question in class first before you do any of this. But then if it's still confusing, you need a way to get back to it, right? So write down the problem you got stuck on, circle it on that piece of paper that you're working on. Or if you're using this for a younger child or a child that's really uncomfortable or stressed out by writing, you can also just provide a highlighter, or you can provide a magnet and put the schedule on a magnet board so they can just flag it. They can flag it with a sticker or a magnet or a highlighter that just reminds them, oh, I wanted to go back to something in English class, or I needed some help with something in science class. And then you can go back and review the material and get an idea of what it was. So then their second step is ask the teacher. Don't ask you, ask the teacher. Schedule office hours, send an email, or if you've got a student that has an IEP and they have a resource teacher or an IEP case manager, that person is their secondary helper besides the classroom teacher. So that person is the person they ask if they're getting really confused or getting really stuck in a particular class. So they can circle back to that resource teacher or case manager and get that help before they have to come to you. And then ultimately, if they do need to come to you, you need to have a little bit of a system for doing that. Your day might include meetings that can't be interrupted, but your day might also include moments where they can access you to ask a question, right? So that first step there under wait, for now move on to your next class or assignment, is really important. You don't want your child sitting there in the chair just waiting for you to be available to help them and not moving forward with anything else. So move on with what you have to do. And then if you have a scheduled time to check in with your parent, I would really advise that. We'll talk about that in a minute. Then you're going to get that help at that time. And if not, then maybe there's a schedule you can look at or something else that you can reference to tell you when and how you can get help. So these are examples of some ways that you can create something that your child can use to reference when you are and are not available. It looks a little bit complicated at first, but it's really something that isn't that difficult once you get used to it. So on the left-hand side there, we have a planner page. That could be something that you could post on the door to your home office. You could put it on your child's bulletin board for the day, anywhere where your child has access to it. And you can just take what is your normal schedule and stick those little red and green dots on it. You can do it with markers, you can do it with stickers, just to identify these are the times when you can interrupt me, and these are the times where you should only interrupt me if you're really bleeding. Right? Medical emergency only is what those red times mean. So absolutely, if there's a serious crisis, interrupt mom or dad. You'd get that phone call at work normally, right? But the red dots generally mean don't interrupt. And then the green dots mean, hey, if something comes up during this time frame, you can come see me. So an older child that might be old enough to really use a planner themselves can really handle it when it's in that planner format. And that might be the format that you most naturally use yourself. You might be able to just print out your calendar and stick some dots on it and stick it in a place where your child can see it. For a younger child, it really needs to be even more visual and less verbal than that. So the clock example that's up there, when the shorthand is on green, it's okay to interrupt. I would recommend using an actual physical clock for this. So if you don't have an analog clock in your house or in your child's room, I would suggest getting one of those really inexpensive $5 clocks, the plastic ones that they sell at Target. I would suggest getting one of those inexpensive clocks and some dry erase markers and actually coloring in the wedges of the clock where you have available time with the dry erase marker, so that on that clock, the hand is physically in that green triangle when it's an okay time for you to be interrupted. And when we look at the schedule on the left, it doesn't look like this parent has a whole lot of available time, right? But that's because we're just looking at that condensed period of workday, school day. When we look at the whole day, we can see that before work starts from 7 to 8, that parent has a time when it's okay to ask for help, or when you might even have a family activity like breakfast together or something like that scheduled. And then throughout the day, there are just those little chunks of time where you might be accessible. If your schedule moves and changes really frequently, you might need to put the clock someplace where you can reach it really quick and erase a block of time and move a block of time, or put your schedule somewhere where you can switch it out really quickly so that your child knows as things are changing. But this is what a visual schedule would look like for you. And it can be a really, really helpful reference point for your child. So let's look at visual schedules for a child. This is actually an adaptation of a visual schedule. Wow, I'm having a hard time talking all of a sudden. This adaptation is for a child who is learning to track their own feelings. So that right-hand column doesn't always exist. We will be sending all of you a template for a visual schedule, and it won't have that right-hand column on it. Right now, when we're adjusting to online school, I would not recommend adding that layer for your child. I would just stick with the time, task, and plan columns. And so you'll see that you'll get the template with all of those little graphics in it as well. If you're watching this later online, in order to get this template and the rest of our online school toolkit, you can simply sign up for our newsletter on our website, and then you'll get a link to these materials as well that you're free to use however you wish. Okay, so on a young child's visual schedule, and some of us here have preschoolers, I saw in the original registration form. So you might have 2 or 3 class periods a day with breaks in between. You might have a schedule that's more like 5 class periods with occasional breaks. So you're going to adjust this to what your child has. The task column is what they generally need to do in that moment. So you're going to a class meeting, you're going to math class. We'll see on the next page that we're also incorporating breaks and things like that in there. The plan section is for the tasks that you need your child to do during that time. So this is a schedule for a child that might be inclined to get distracted, forget their materials, or show up late to class. So we have these visual reminders here. Bring your materials. We've got the notebook and the pencil and the eraser. Keep your eyes on the teacher. We've got the eyeball there. And show up on time for class. We've got the watch. These symbols only work if you're having a conversation with your child and choosing them together. But this is a really nice shortcut for kids actually of all ages. You can use it for teens as well. You just might use slightly less cutesy pictures. They can draw their own or create their own color-coded reminders, however it will work for them. But it's really important that it has this visual component so that it doesn't take any brain power to look at it. You just look at it and you go, oh yeah, that's what I'm supposed to do right now. On the left-hand side where you have the time, the clock hands are set up at the time that the activity starts. And then that little shaded section of the clock is showing you how long the activity lasts. This is really important, especially for kids that are averse to the learning process, where they're just waiting for recess. Really important for them to see that this has an endpoint and that the clock is going to advance toward that endpoint. You can do that by coloring in an actual physical clock, like I was talking about doing for the parent schedule as well. But you can also set it up this way, where they just see this is how long this activity is going to last. There are some really great tools when you're in and out of the room between class periods with your child, which with a preschooler, you really might need to be in and out of the room very frequently. There are some cool tools like this time timer. It is actually called a time timer that allow you to turn the time on and create that chunk of time on the clock for them. Right, so this is if we had a 15-minute task, we're counting down with the time timer on the 15-minute task. And that would just sit on your child's desk and show them, how long it's going to be until that 15-minute task is over. It also helps them see how many things they have to get through before they get to the fun stuff, before they get to recess, before they get to a break, before they get to time with you. So let's look at the second half of this child's morning schedule. So this is the continuation of that same visual schedule. It just didn't fit all on one page. And you can see that, there's a third class period for this kiddo before the break. And the things that this child needs to remember to do during that third class period are a little bit different, because we saw on the emotions side of the previous one that the child was getting overwhelmed in math. They needed to remember to check their work and to ask for help in math. They were feeling really overwhelmed in that moment. And so now they are drained coming into social studies. This child is going to need a movement break in social studies when they haven't been provided one before that. So we have the picture of the child there doing a yoga pose. This is reminding this child, get up physically out of your chair and do something with your body while you're paying attention to social studies. This is going to help you really stay on task. And then we have the little thought bubble there, just to remind them to tune in the brain, right? Do some thinking about what you're learning in social studies. That will also really help keep you engaged. And for this child who's tracking their feelings, we can see that they filled in the face over there on the right-hand side to say they were really sleepy during social studies. This is letting us know that maybe they didn't use those tools that were in the plan section, or maybe they weren't enough, right? Maybe we need something else there. So that's where the feelings tracking can really help you as a parent. We have in this example schedule 4 different ways of tracking the feelings. We've got different feeling faces in those first 2 rows, and then down here on the second page, we've got just a blank circle that they can fill in with a feeling face, or just empty space that they can fill in with a word. So we see for break time, this child filled in, yay, it's break time. We're really excited about that. And the plan for break time might be playing an online game with a friend, or it might be having lunch, right? So those 2 things are there on the break time section. Let me go back a slide here for a moment and just click into what the visual schedule template looks like. Again, this is the template that you're going to get that you can, if you choose, set up for your own child. It's taking a second to load here. There we go. So we have the blank clocks that are already in there for you. And then it's not letting me scroll here. Hang on. So you'll see that as you scroll down in the template, you have all these little graphics that you can pull from just to plug into your child's visual schedule, and they're already sized so that they fit in the boxes. So it's really easy. But if your child doesn't like the pictures that are there, or if you're working with an older child that maybe wants to create their own, you can create drawings to go in the boxes as well. I would really recommend including time with you on the visual schedule. So when there is an opportunity for your child to be spending time with you, maybe you're having lunch together, you're having snack together, you've planned a game together, you've got something going on where you can spend that time with your child. Put that on the visual schedule. Especially really young kids are going to be looking forward to that. That predictability is going to soothe some of their anxiety, knowing when they really have access to you. That's on your visual schedule, but it can also be on their visual schedule. And you can have them draw a picture of the 2 of you together to be the symbol for that, or you can take a favorite photograph and cut it out and use that as the symbol for that. So it can be really special for a kid to have mom or dad or other family time indicated on that visual schedule so that they know it's consistently happening and they can press through the tough stuff to get to the piece that they're really looking forward to. Maria, is there anything you would add to that?
I think definitely including them in making this and creating it. Each child or young person has their different interests. So whether it's like Legos or Pokemon or anime or LOL dolls, like whatever it is that they, to kind of, that they feel connected to the schedule and they feel like it's theirs and they can add their creativity to it. And then like if they're a little bit older, yeah, including drawing, or again, whatever it is that, TikTok, like they can get creative with it to kind of make it what they want so that they can see it and they can also get a little bit of joy, as they're looking at what their day is going to be like.
Definitely. And the purpose of creating these tools up front is so that you don't have to be popping in all day long repeatedly and structuring everything. You have it there in a way that your child can reference, which is very much how a teacher does it in the classroom. You usually have a visual schedule for the day in the classroom. You also might have, particularly if you have a child who has an IEP, who has special needs of some kind, you also might have some cues for that child around problems that are likely to come up. If you have a child that really doesn't like surprises, they might have a card on their desk at school that shows them how they're expected to respond when there's a surprise, or what tools they can use when there's a surprise in the schedule for the day. For example, if there's a substitute teacher or a change in routine in some way, desks are rearranged and they weren't expecting it, those kinds of things. So you can also use similar sorts of help cards for situations where your child might encounter a problem in online learning. One of our participants asked, how can we do this with a child who isn't yet computer savvy? That's a tricky one. Being able to click in the right places with the mouse and get to what you need is definitely something that a lot of kids need a roadmap for. You might need to go step by step and do some screenshots and create a tool for your child to reference in the moment that their Zoom window closes, or they didn't get to class on time. Can I still join the Zoom session? Some kids will just jump right in, and others will really freeze in a moment like that. Like, I wasn't there on time. I don't want to create a scene. I'm not going to do it now. They get very upset and frozen in a moment like that. So when you have that happen, and you know that your child might have that happen, you can create what's called a help card. Right? So this here is an example of a help card for a child who didn't know what class was next, right? I've forgotten where my schedule is, or where I'm supposed to look, or what's supposed to happen. I don't know where I'm supposed to go. Mom, right? That's the moment that you expect that child to really need some support and assistance. So if you know that that's coming for this particular child, or likely to be coming for this particular child, you can create what's called a help card. And it can just be a simple little note card. It can be a piece of paper, but you're going to have a symbol on one side for the problem that might come up. I would add words to it as well. And then on the other side, you're just going to have, what do we do when this comes up? What's the next step? So you can see for this child, we've made the next step, check the schedule and check the clock, right? Let me move the window over here so you can see it. So check the schedule and look at the clock. So you're matching those two things up to figure out, oh, what class is next? And then maybe the third step after that is ask mom or dad for help, because there may still be situations where you need to ask mom or dad for help. But you can try those first two troubleshooting steps first before needing to ask for help in the situation. This also really drives independence in online learning. Then we just have another example here of a help card. I'm getting really frustrated. This is going to be a common issue, right? Kids are trying their hardest to focus and tune in and watch an online presentation, and it's exhausting. It's exhausting for us as adults. So they're going to get to that point where they're getting really frustrated, or they're overwhelmed by the material. They don't understand how to do it. So what are we going to do with that frustration? We know we have to handle the frustration itself before we can solve the problem with the school material. So this child is getting really frustrated, and what she needs to remember to do is take a water break. Go to the kitchen, pour a glass of water, get a little bit of physical distance from the situation that's going on just for that moment, just long enough to fill up the water. And then she's going to need to grab a stuffed animal to squeeze, because that's something that brings her comfort. That's something that we've noticed about her refresh button. So that's her help card for when she gets really frustrated. She now has tools at her disposal to use to reset herself, so that she doesn't have to come to you for every reset. There may be moments where she still needs your help to reset, but she's got these first couple of steps that she can really go to first. If you have questions about particular help cards or ways to structure this for your child in particular, we would love to see them in the chat. Maria, do we have other questions that are coming up in the chat?
Nothing right now. I was thinking too about the clock. If you have a child that is not able to read the clock, that type of clock, there are ways that you can modify to include kind of the tracking of the time, like whatever part of the chart, you need to modify for your child works. And just, I think, reviewing the steps as well, like with the screenshots, like taking them through the process, so that when they are in that situation, that it's a level of comfort that's already there.
Yeah.
Just to comment that the help cards sound like an excellent idea.
Awesome. I'm really glad that that's helpful. This is one of my favorite tools for kids in the classroom. It gets them some independence in managing their own emotions during the school day, and it can be so helpful. You can make them teeny tiny if kids don't want them seen, if they want them sort of out of the way, or you can make them really big and poster sized if that's what your particular child needs. So it is really nice to have that help card tool. You mentioned, Maria, thinking about kids that can't read the clock, right? And so they might not know necessarily what time it is, but they can see if the hand is in that green zone or not if you're using the actual clock. It's really important for all of this to take a good look at what your child can do independently, can do with a little bit of help or guidance or structuring, and can't do at all. And if there are things that your child currently can't do at all, it's not realistic to expect them to be able to do them in online school. As much as it would help us all, our kids aren't going to take a huge developmental leap forward just because online school demands it. And so if you have a child that really does need that movement break every 15 minutes, I would recommend having that buzzing watch that goes off every 15 minutes and reminds that child, I can get up and walk around my chair 17 times right now, or I can spin in my chair right now, or I can do some jumping jacks right now. And when you have a child that really needs that, I would also really recommend talking to the teacher about it and explaining that, you know, my child pays attention better when they're able to do this, this, and this at the same time. You don't want them having other things in the room that will create a distraction for them. So if there's a fidget that they really love, but that also really creates a distraction, for example, something like Play-Doh. Kids love to squeeze it. It feels really good. But if you have a child who wants to create a masterpiece with the Play-Doh and has it in front of their eyes, really trying to sculpt it perfectly, that's not a great fidget for that child. A good fidget is something that they can do automatically with their hands. They can, you know, rub their fingers on it. They can squeeze it. They can mold it and manipulate it, but it doesn't require their eyes and it doesn't require their thinking. So only you know really what the best tools for that are for your child. For adults, we often use things like our rings or our watches, right, as fidgets. We take them on and off throughout the day, or we cross and uncross our feet. For those of you that know me and have seen me in the office in person, I do that stuff all the time. I'm constantly moving in my chair in little subtle ways. And for me, that's my favorite fidget. It just works for me to keep me tuned in and keep me paying attention. So your children are going to have things like that too, that they can do that can be part of the environment, but not something that draws their eye and not something that requires thought. Other questions?
Doesn't look like anything yet, but feel free to add to the chat and or unmute yourself, whichever you feel more comfortable with. I guess one question I have, Robin, is what if, okay, I'm implementing the help card or I'm implementing this new system and I'm not getting the results I was hoping for? How would you deal with that?
Oh, that's an excellent question. So the first thing I would do is use your own problem solving process, right? Think about what your help card would look like in this situation. What's your next step? And usually for most parents, the next step is to ask why, right? What is the barrier here? Is it that we have a 2-hour chunk of time that we're asking this child to do it independently, and maybe this child was only capable of doing it for an hour or an hour and a half? So are we stretching beyond their capacity here? Is there something about the tool that we're using that doesn't work for them? Is it not visual enough? Is it too wordy? Do they have 5 tools up on their bulletin board and they're not sure which one to look at which time? I would really strongly recommend implementing one tool at a time. You want your child to be able to use something effortlessly before you add something else to it. So that, I think, would be the next step. Like, let's scale it one step back for what we're trying to do. If we've added the emotion tracking to the visual schedule, let's take the emotion tracking back out. If we've got 3 things in the plan column where we want them to be watching, listening, and checking for understanding, which we might have the check mark for. If we want them doing all 3 of those things, maybe all 3 of those things are too much. Maybe we need to scale back to just watch and listen for the moment, and we'll go back to checking our work or checking for understanding after we get really good at the watch and listen part.
Great. Thank you, Robin. We do have 2 questions that popped up as well.
Yay, thank you, everybody.
Yeah, so how to implement some of this, like the help cards, with an older child, even a teen, where you haven't used this kind of system before?
That's a good question. With a teen, I would start with really building the self-awareness piece. With any child, it's a conversation at the beginning. So you're asking your child or you're asking your teen, when you get stuck, what do you do? How did you do that in the classroom? When you couldn't leave the room and you were trapped at your desk, how did you handle this feeling that came up? Or how did you identify that you needed to circle back to this piece of information? And then just make pictures or make a small chart of those tools. You can create an Excel sheet. You can create all kinds of different things where you just look at one column and then you can tell what to do in the next column. So maybe you add those tools to the right-hand column, and in the left-hand column you have all the different situations where you might need to use those tools, and you can match them up by color coding, or you can match them up by cutting them out and manipulating them on a bulletin board or on a magnet board. But I would start with that conversation of, how do you handle it? What expertise do you, my teenager, already have about yourself that I might not even know? And then what things do you really, really not know how to handle? And where can I, as a parent, get the answer for how to help a child handle that? So it might be that you call us for a 15-minute consult. It might be that you do a Google search. It might be that you look at our blog on our practice website, which is now searchable by topic. We're really excited about that. Or it might be that you have a favorite go-to parenting book that you use. I often recommend to parents that they choose a parenting book. Not 5 parenting books, a parenting book that really speaks to you and feels like it matches your philosophy, and make that your go-to for how to parent your child in a difficult situation. So go back to that book. What is this author saying I should do? How is this author saying I should interpret this situation? And then, of course, if your child has a therapist, make sure you deal that person in and let them help you with it as well.
Yeah, and I would just add to Robin, like definitely meeting, especially older children, teenagers, where they're at, identifying what those strengths are, and then also sharing a little bit about like what your hope is, right? Like what's your motivation for introducing this help card or forming this schedule, and really letting them know like that you want to support them, and that online learning has its challenges, and that you're all balancing different responsibilities, and you want to continue to empower them to kind of be in control and practice responsibility, but you also are aware that you're there for them as well. And so I think just having an open and honest conversation, so it's not necessarily like I am another thing I'm telling you to do, but more of, let's talk about this and let's see what's going to work best. This fall, we had the spring, we kind of got thrown into it, and this fall we have a little bit more of an understanding of what things are going to feel like or look like.
Definitely. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for bringing that up, Maria. That launching conversation that you have at the beginning of this definitely needs to be a back and forth conversation. Mm-hmm. It's questions to your child or your teen. Where do you think you might get stuck? What do you think you might need my help with? And how can we create a system where you can come to me for help when you absolutely need it, but you also can figure some of these things out on your own?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that question. We have another question. Do you have any tips for online school where parents have to be involved in teaching younger children as the format in more video and self-study versus live instruction?
That is a very tricky one for young children. I'm going to assume that you're talking about preschoolers. And at that age, we're really talking more about shaping their social emotional development with the online school than we're talking about academic concepts, right? Academic concepts can be caught up on at any age, but we're wanting them to have that development of being in school and interacting with people. And so that's a big part of why you have to be there as a parent. Um, if you're also working from home, that's pretty challenging to do. I think realistically, as much as this might not be the answer that you're hoping for, realistically, you may need a childcare kind of setup in that situation during the times that you are at work, so that the child does have an interactive experience. You might be able to set that up through siblings or through a small pod play group of some kind, but you do need an experience for your child. You can't realistically expect your child to just stand by while you're doing something else. It's not developmentally appropriate at that age. But where parents are the teachers, where parents are delivering the content and you have time to do that, you have the opportunity to be with your child and do that. I would suggest really shaping the amount of learning work you do around your child's capacity, right? So don't create a 3-hour school day for a child that really does best with an hour and a half. I would try to really structure it during the time of day that your child is most available for learning. So if they're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed at 7 o'clock in the morning versus a child that is a little sleepier, takes a little while to get going, maybe does their best learning at lunchtime. I would really try to structure it around those times of day and keep it limited to what your child is capable of doing. The number one most important piece in teaching a preschooler is going to be that connection. So the learning is about the experience the child is having with you, what you're able to do together versus the content itself.
So, Robin, this is actually a third grader.
Oh,
If that changes a little bit. I mean, a lot of what you said, I think, still applies, like finding that balance.
yeah, definitely.
What would you say if it's a slightly older child?
Okay.
Third grade.
So you've got a third grader that doesn't have live instruction but needs to navigate to various websites, is what I think I'm seeing, in order to access the content. And so you as a parent might need to help them with that navigation part of it. I would try to still automate that. I would create a visual schedule for it and have the child do it at set times. That routine really helps prime the brain to be available for learning at those times. So I would still create the visual schedule. It's just that it would be of your own design. You would be choosing what class comes first and what class comes next. And you might need to create a flow chart, or you might need to create a help card that shows the child where to click to get from one set of material to another set of material. And they may need breaks because there's no interaction on the screen. They may need moments where they can come running to you and show you what they've accomplished. I would really recommend that. On the visual schedule, you can actually add a section where the child lets you know what they're proud of from that time or what they really enjoyed during that time. We have a post on our blog right now about navigating online school with ADHD. And in there, we talk about reviewing the day in a way that allows your child to go back and say, oh, I really wished I could show you what I was learning in this class, or I really was proud of myself that I got this math problem right. Whatever it is, for them to be able to run to you and say, look, 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 so that human connection is still part of learning. If you can structure your day to make that happen, I think that would be fantastic.
Yeah, and I think I'll just add, I love that idea of having some in the links, like putting in, if it is video and self-study, if it's at all possible to include that in the times, and so that they can just have that format and then go to whatever time of day. So it's all in one place, because I from the spring, I saw that sometimes there's so many different links or assignments, and so finding a way to organize things. And then also prioritizing, if there are a lot of different assignments, and depending on how quickly or slowly a child might be moving through those, prioritizing like what we really want to make sure gets done versus it's great if it gets done, but realistically, it might not be possible. So I think just, again, the teachers are aware that it's a tough time. And so they're understanding that, parents and students, if you're participating, if you're trying to do things, then, they just appreciate and reaching out for help as needed.
Yeah, absolutely. You might need to have that preview review meeting with your child at the end of the day to really go through and schedule the following day and figure out what information needs to go where. They really may need some help creating the calendar and setting things up so that they can work independently day by day by day. So you do really end up more in the teacher role in that situation, which is stressful and difficult. Be sure that you're using your refresh button on a regular basis, especially if you have pressure to also be doing other tasks at the same time. All right. I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat. Are you, Maria?
No, I think feel free if there's any other questions, and you can always reach out to Robin and I, and we're here to support you on this joy of the fall and the transition again back into school.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, everybody. It's been great having you with us.
Yeah.
We will look forward to seeing you at the next one of these. We're going to schedule the next one based on the schedule preferences that came in through the registration form. So if you have a thought about days or times or even topic information that you would like for the next presentation or the next parent Q&A, just let us know. You can use the contact form on the website for that, or you can submit another registration even though this particular workshop is over. Feel free to do that so that you can give us your preferences and we can meet your needs at the next one as well.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, everybody. Be well.
Thank you. Bye-bye.